Hey everyone and welcome to Storytime. My name is Jake and before this video starts I just want to say something really quick. Basically, I've started a second channel because of something YouTube has implemented, so I've posted a community post about it, but if you haven't seen it I'll comment it down below and pin it. Basically, everything is going to stay the same apart from it's going to be one video a day on each channel instead of two on one. So I think the current plan is to have the malicious compliance on this channel and then the other board on the other channel and then to adjust over time to see what you guys like the best. So please go and subscribe to the other channel so you don't miss out on any other videos. It's just going to be called Storytime 2 and I'll leave it at the top of the description. Thanks and let's get right into the video. Can't work more than 20 hours? Okay, then you take my place or get fired. This happened about 7 months ago. I used to work as a front desk assistant at one of my university's student housing. Our duty was to check the ID of every student at that building to make sure they actually lived there. Yeah, the door was equipped with an RFID system, and they all had RFID-enabled card, which they had to swipe before opening the door. Make temp card for those who locked themselves out, and call the appropriate authorities in case someone passes out or fire alarm rings and stuff. We had to work under a graduate community assistant or GCD who used to schedule us and approve our timesheets. The university policy regarding student employment was students were not allowed to work for more than 20 hours. Under certain conditions, the students could make it up to 25 hours, but the supervisor had to approve the timesheet. GCD used to change every few years as they graduate. New graduate students would replace them. During my junior year, a new GCD was appointed in our building. We'll call her Ellen. She always used to try and boss over student employees. Everybody hated her. Let's fast forward a few months. I got a co-op offer on one of the reputed companies on my field for the next term and summer. So I emailed her the same day I got my offer letter saying I won't be able to work next term. The next day I met her at work. She came over to my desk and asked whether it was paid co-op or unpaid. It was paid co-op and the pay was $8 more than her hourly pay. I subtly disclosed that as she always used to be bossy over us. Boy oh boy, she really did make the rest of term hell for me. Remember, I worked in that building for the last 2.5 years and knew all the residents on the first name basis, so I never had to check their ID card, but she made me check the card of every individual passing through the gate. Now comes the best part. The girl, Max, was supposed to work after me and always used to come late, so I had to stay on the desk until she came. If she was late for more than 15 minutes, I would put that half hour under my name. I was getting paid for that, so I didn't make a big deal. Because of situations like these, we were only allowed to schedule for 20 hours max, but we can work for 25 hours max. At one time, she didn't show up for her shift at all, so I stayed throughout her shift. This caused my total hours to reach above 20. On the day of approving the timesheet, Ellen called me to her office and asked me why my hours exceeded 20. I explained what happened, then she started saying I wasn't allowed to work more than 20 and she can't approve my 2 hours above 20. Apparently, I had to email her a day prior to working someone else's shift and it had to be approved. Cue malicious compliance. Remember, front desk assistant was the first emergency responders, so it was emphasized in our training that the desk should never be left vacant, which is why I continued to work even after someone didn't show up. After that day, if Max became more than 5 minutes late, I would call Ellen to look after the desk. She really wasn't happy about it, but that was the rule. She also couldn't fire Max as hiring another student worker and training them in the middle of a term would be troublesome. After a few times, Ellen stopped picking up my calls. I would wait until I made enough hours to make 20 that week, and I would leave if Max wasn't there by that time. One day after I left, unfortunately, someone burned their popcorn in the microwave, and it triggered the fire alarm. The residents noticed that there was no one at the front desk, and they themselves called 911 and proceeded to evacuate the building. After a few moments, a few cop cars and 2 fire trucks reached the building. All this was happening and Ellen had no idea about it. The area coordinator reached the scene and managed everything. Firemen found the source and everything was cleared. The next day, I got an email from our area coordinator to meet him as I was the last person on the desk. As I reached there, along with the area coordinator, There was Ellen and another guy who seemed important. They started by saying how irresponsibly I acted. I got fired and the disciplinary charges that might follow. Then I began to explain everything to them. I started from that unapproved 2 hours and went along with how Ellen said to me I wasn't allowed to work for more than 20 hours. I even told them I called both Max and Ellen, but no one picked up the phone. I stayed 45 minutes after my shift ended as I wasn't allowed to work more than I just left. The room went silent and Ellen turned red. They dismissed me and told me I will get an email regarding their decision. Later that day, the area coordinator apologized for the misunderstanding over email and told me I can have my job back, but I declined. I was getting a co-op with a good pay a few months later, so I decided to take my time off. Later I heard from my friends, who were still working there, that both Ellen and Max were fired, and no one is scheduled for 28 hours, and the area coordinator had to cover that. I genuinely feel bad for the guy. Won't let me hang up? Fine, I'll enjoy the 5-hour call. Oh, this happened years ago. I've spent a large portion of my work life working in call centers or in positions adjacent to call centers. Early on, I was at one of the more classically toxic call centers. Lots of micromanagement, no real channels to pass feedback up to decision makers. Nothing really mattered except for the surveys and KPIs, and which KPI was the priority changed from week to week. There were issues with spotty agents hanging up really early in a call and claiming it was and similar avoidance, so management fussed with our phone systems and made it literally impossible for any of us to actually hang up a call. If we got an abusive caller or a similar problem, we were supposed to let our team leads know, but the team leads really never did anything about the yellers or perverts. Because I turned up on time and didn't cause problems, I got promoted into our second tier pretty quickly, the people who you actually talk to when you demand a supervisor. My actual access didn't change, just broadened the scope of work I had to do a bit, which includes calling other businesses and customers from time to time while sorting out the problem. I quickly discovered that one of our vendors who I had to call regularly had the same lockdown that we had. I can't disconnect, they can't disconnect. Being, someone with work ethic and initiative, I just used my task manager to force a disconnect so we could get back to work. But apparently that shows up in their tracking and I got yelled at because I'm not supposed to ever hang up on a customer. Next time I had to call that vendor, I told them that I wasn't allowed to force a hang up anymore, told my actual supervisor this call would probably go on long because neither of us were allowed to hang up. He said he'd look into it and proceeded to do nothing. So after wrapping up the problem, I chatted with the other agent for a bit and proceeded to work on homework for the rest of my shift. A hair over 5 hours. At the end of my shift, I transferred the call to the duty manager so I could clock out and go home. Only had to do that 3 to 4 more times before they adjusted the system to let Tier 2 folk hang up. I had an amazing ready-time ratio those weeks, though my handle times were crap. Got a lot of reading done too. Edit, sorry I forgot that KPI is even an acronym. It stands for Key Performance Indicator. It's basically the set of information that managers use to judge performance. It might be handle times, sales numbers, whether people are logged in on time, or other stuff. Director pulls the contract on the truck driver and quickly regrets it. At my old workplace, we had a truck driver. We'll call him Jim, for no particular reason. Our director had decided to cut down on the amount of manpower in the production unit to try and squeeze some more money out of it. One of the people laid off was a storage worker, and the director then wanted Jim to take over on storage and make the big truck more whoever needs it uses it kind of thing, as opposed to having one man who mans it for the majority of the time. Though driving the truck only took about half of Jim's day, and the rest of the time he did all kinds of other things around the company that needed doing. Maintenance, cleaning the yard, cutting the grass, etc. Now my boss had made a fair fuss about this during the meetings where this was decided, since Jim being on that truck was a very good thing for the company, but alas, director didn't want to listen. They had a meeting where Jim and the 3 people who were the likely candidates for using the truck were informed of this change. The storage worker had been fired the same day. Now nobody was really happy about this. One of the practical problems is, when you have multiple people using a tool, whether it be a hammer, a power drill, or a truck, it becomes a mess to coordinate. who needs it when, who handles what in regards to maintenance, and so on and so on. But none were more unhappy than Jim, and he quite openly said that storage worker wasn't his job, to which the director made one of many big mistakes in this whole streamlining process he was doing to the production unit. He pulled out the contract that had highlighted work in the production bit. So what kind of malicious compliance does an angry former truck driver get up to? Well, glad you asked. Very simply, he stopped doing anything that wasn't related to production. Examples of minor things Jim stopped doing: buying basic groceries for the production office, milk, sugar, etc. He stopped bringing breakfast to the production workers. Jim drove to a local sandwich maker and picked up breakfast and lunch for most in the production, meaning that now everybody went on their own, creating massive amounts of delay in every department. Maintaining order in the yard so everything stored out there was easy to find, and traffic could go through easily. But the very best thing he stopped was clearing away snow. You see, one of the many things Jim did was if there was a forecast for snow, he'd set an alarm at 4 a.m. only to look out the window, and if he needed to clear snow, he'd just go to work and make sure the snow was cleared, and the roads salted for when everybody else arrived. And that he also stopped. And this particular year, winter hit us pretty suddenly, so there was quite a bit of snow and ice all over the place, including the main office building's parking lot. Now Jim, being the absolute champ that he was, had made sure that the production unit had been cleared, but left the main office building, on the other side of the road, to fend for itself. And since we, in the production, meet in earlier than the office people did, we could stand there and watch as they started arriving, and half their parking spots had so much snow in them that they were unusable, and how their cars just skipped around on the ice under the snow. It was glorious. 3 cars were lightly damaged, and one took a pretty hefty hit as he clipped the corner of the concrete building. And no less than 9 people fell on the ice, including the director himself, which resulted in about 45 production workers standing inside our machine hall, almost weeing themselves laughing. Oh, and edit, I forgot to mention a little fun thing. Later that day, an email was sent out across the whole company, asking if anyone knew why the external contractor we had hired to clear snow had stopped. Apparently, the office nuts had no clue that it was Jim who cleared the snow for them every morning during the winter.